Good morning, and thank you for coming to our panel on the next frontier of baseball analytics presented by Sabre. I'm really happy and just honored to be joined by a terrific panel, starting with our moderator, Brian Kenny from MLB Network. And then we have Jeff Luhnow from the Houston Astros, Vince Gennaro from Sabre, Rob Nair from Fox Sports, Bill Squadron from Bloomberg Sports, and Nate Silver from 538. Now, we're going to go for about 45 minutes with the panel, and then we want to give a chance for questions and answers. So if you have any questions, you can either text them or tweet them to us. You can text them to 22333, beginning your text with the word frontiers, plural. And then if you want to tweet your question, you're going to tweet @poll, beginning with the word frontiers, and then your question. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brian Kenny, who will get our panel started.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Let me just stand up for a second. I'm sorry, I can't sit down. I'm honored to be a part of the panel and just to be here with the pound-for-pound greats in baseball. So let's just get it started right away. And before we get into what's next, and specifically big picture, small picture, maybe we can start. And Vince, jump in on this first. I noticed at the Sabre Analytics Conference last year, there does seem to be still a disconnect in the vast amount of information that is there and what actually gets translated out on the field. And certainly Jeff will have a different answer for this. But where are we as far as the information getting out into the decision-making and onto the field?
Well, I think this is one of the real gaps in baseball today. I think we have done, as an analytics community, a tremendous job of inventing new ways to play the game and run the game and manage the game and create rosters. Translating it all the way to the field level is a different story, and I think it has to do with the lack, in some instances, of organizational alignment, the not taking into full consideration all of the stakeholders when you're trying to make a change. It's why things like tandem pitching, starting pitching isn't happening today. I mean, there's a lot of issues, including the incentive systems and the way they're structured. But I do think one of the real opportunities over the next 5 years is for organizations to build alignment all the way from top to bottom.
Right. Bill, you're in the business of getting the information to the teams. Where do you think it is?
Yeah, I think there's a wide range within Major League Baseball in terms of how clubs are using analytics and data to help them make decisions and to affect what's happening on the field. And, there's no question that over the past few years, every club has embraced analytics to some degree, much more than in the past. But there is still a wide range. And some clubs, for example, you referenced the Bloomberg system, some clubs use it fully to its full capacity and have come up with processes to have the information translated into decisions. Others are using small pieces of it. And what I think we're seeing is increasingly clubs are focused on how to use it, but there's a long way to go. And many clubs are still, simply using things like, Lotus Notes or Excel spreadsheets to help them make decisions. Those decisions don't get translated. The workflow's not that efficient. So, there's movement, but there's still a long way to go for a lot of the clubs.
Nate, I know you recently wrote in the ESPN, the magazine analytics issue that it's football that's lagging behind. But where do you see baseball as from the spectrum of your work?
I mean, as compared to many other fields of endeavor elsewhere in life, it's been kind of a revolution, really. The thing about baseball is that we're still getting more and more new types of data, and so you're kind of running against a moving target. But it's come a long way pretty fast, and I think it's evident in the way the game is played. Everything from fewer one-run strategies to, one topic for debate is how much of the resurgence of pitching and defense is because of better analytics, understanding how to separate those two things, understanding how to use relief pitchers more efficiently, project pitcher performance better with the pitch effects data. So, I'm more of an optimist, again, having come a couple of years ago from politics where things are very, very primitive. And people think I'm just bashing it for the sake of bashing it. But baseball in some ways, think about Moneyball, it's a great story. It's also an exceptional case where you have the right alignment of data, plus incentives, plus people who have a desire to innovate. Usually you have one or more barrier in most fields where you don't have such rapid adaptation of technology.
Rob, where are we?
Well, one instructive case is the Pirates and their defensive shifts. And they went through a lot more shifts last season and probably saved a lot of runs. And that was all about buy-in from the manager and the coaching staff, which they hadn't really had before. And that was really about, it started with the coach, with the front office, convincing one of the coaches that this is a good idea, and then he helped convince the manager it was a good idea, and now he's fully on board. And that's one example of something it's not new. The defensive shifts have been around, over shifts, since the 1920s, but oddly, it's taken until basically now for everyone to not everyone in baseball, but everyone who does what we do, to realize that it can make sense a lot more than anyone's ever done it before. And as you see the Pirates buy into it, which is most people looked at their coaching staff and said, this is a bunch of old school guys. But they've embraced it. And I think it's only a matter of time, whether it's a year or 3 years, when almost all of the teams are shifting a lot more than they ever have before.
Jeff, obviously you're doing a tear down and a build up, kind of a holistic approach. So what was important to you to do maybe even differently than what you had with all the success with the Cardinals?
Well, I do think, first of all, baseball's in great shape. And so there's nothing wrong with the game. It's a wonderful game. And sometimes the people that are doing the analysis don't recognize all the factors beyond the analysis that go between the analysis and the decisions on the field. And there's so much involved in it. I do think that I can't really speak for other clubs, but even a club that has alignment from the top and is able to hand select major league staff, minor league staff, front office staff, and has all the information available, you still run into a lot of challenges in getting it implemented. And I'll give you an example. Last year, we were playing our first road series against Anaheim, and we overshifted in a critical point in the game, and Pujols hit a ball down the line, and runner scored, and we lost the game. And it's hard to tell somebody it was the right thing to do, even though the outcome wasn't what you wanted. The outcome didn't work out, but the process was right, so stick to it. It's the same thing, playing blackjack. If you stick to that card, you're going to lose less than if you go off of it. But you're not playing 10,000 times. That one game is magnified in your memory. And so you're dealing with humans here, and when they have a bad experience, and sometimes they have a bad experience because the advice we give them is not great. We didn't consider this factor. We didn't consider the fact that Lucas Harrell may not want to throw that sinker outside because he sees the shift, and therefore he throws a suboptimal pitch, and it gets slapped into right field, and we lose the game because of the psychology of the human being. So I think that's a real challenge, and there's a lot that we don't know still, but we've progressed so far. If you think about the play-by-play data, to the TLV data, the type, location, velocity, to the video data now, the radar data, there's so much out there to benefit from. It's also just kind of showing us what we don't know, because every time you get new data, it creates a lot of questions.
Is your organizational structure any different?
No, it's very similar. Player development, scouting, international. We do have a major league coaching staff that is well integrated with the front office. Our analysts, and we've got 5 full-time analysts with advanced degrees, they spend a lot of time in the clubhouse, and that's unusual. You don't see that a lot in other organizations.
What's Rob, let me start with you. What's a competitive advantage? Because it's always, well, what do you do now? What's a competitive advantage that can be grabbed right now? Is there one?
Well, sure there is one. I'm not sure I know what it is. It seems to me that, again, I'm sort of fixated on this defensive shifting because I think it's so interesting, but it doesn't seem to me that the batters have even begun to try to take advantage of them. There seems to be an obvious counter move there, but are we seeing more bunts? Not really that I've noticed. Are we seeing more guys go the other way? I don't think so. The game has become a power game, and partly it's home runs, a lot more home runs than there were, say, 30, 40 years ago, although that's come down a little bit since 10 years ago. But on the pitching side, it's absolutely a power game, and the hitters haven't adjusted. Maybe there's no way to adjust. Maybe if guys are throwing routinely 95 miles an hour, all you can do is swing the bat as hard as you can and hope for the best. But maybe hitters are talented enough where they could make adjustments and not strike out so much, go the other way, bunt against the shift. We haven't seen, as far as I can tell, any real adjustment there.
A counterattack then. Go ahead,
I would say, Brian, that if there's a competitive advantage, it's really about focus. It's less about finding a silver bullet. But, as Jeff was saying, there's such a huge volume of data now, and it's going to be increasing. It is a moving target. There's going to be more data coming in, whether it's defensive data or biometric data. And so if you don't focus on it and come up with a process that allows you to filter out the noise, come up with the things that are efficiently helpful to your decision making, and then get that into a flow that allows you to do it, you're going to miss opportunities. And those organizations that are well focused and do come up with processes that allow you to do it, will have an advantage. So I would say that while it may sound somewhat mundane to say that really the competitive advantage comes with having the right focus and the right people coming up with fast, efficient processes, that's really where the advantage comes in.
What do you think, Nate?
It's been talked about for a long time, but looking at player health, performance from game to game, if you basically have a team where no one gets hurt all year, you probably have a wild card contender on that basis alone. It certainly seems anecdotally like some teams do a lot better with rehabilitating players, understanding how much strain guys are putting on their bodies. I don't know if it's low-hanging fruit anymore, but I think the reward is really high.
Vince?
I'll answer the question on two levels. One, from a leadership standpoint, having a field manager in the dugout who understands and is aligned with all of the insights that the front office is generating is a critical factor, because that's a key potential block point that we see in certain organizations. But the other, if you get more tactical on a specific tactic, I think this whole notion of positional versatility is a bit underdeployed in a lot of instances. Players like Ben Zobrist, Alexi Amarista, Skip Schumacher, Matt Carpenter, who can play multiple positions adequately and have a decent bat. And what you get out of that is you get two things. You get a much better platoon advantage at the plate, and you get much better recovery when you have an injured player because of where you can plug people in. The Reds don't have any of this. Okay, the Reds have guys who play right field, center field. The Indians and the A's do a great job of positional versatility.
Jeff, can you give us something without giving away the farm?
I think what Nate said is the next frontier, health. And there's so much scientific information that we have access to, but yet there's so little we actually know. And keeping players on the field performing at their maximum capacity is a huge competitive advantage. And it has not only to do with preventing injuries and recovering from injuries, but simple stuff like nutrition, sleep. We moved to the American League West, and we've got a lot of flights coming back to Houston where our plane lands at 5 or 6 in the morning. How do we encourage our players to get the rest that they need so they can perform? There's so many different areas involved in that. And then I think another frontier that we're working on extensively in the Astros is, how do you take all this information and turn it into teaching tools? How do you work it into your player development system? How do you help a 16-year-old kid in the Dominican Republic figure out how to improve their game? And all the way through the minor leagues. So we talk a lot about catcher framing. There's been a lot of good work done there. We use a lot of these analytic tools to evaluate players. Which player is better than the other, to come up with these forecasting models, who's projected to be better in the future. But how do we turn a below average framer into an above average framer? I think there's a lot of work that can be done there in the near future, and I think it's exciting.
Yeah,
Big picture. Go ahead,
picking up on that, I would just say that what we're seeing at Bloomberg is an increasing interest in getting data collected at all different levels. So today, at the major league level, there's an enormous amount of data being collected, and it's, while I wouldn't say it's comprehensive, there are still things to come. It's very extensive. But in order to be able to do the kinds of things that are predictive for health and risk of injury, looking at comparative opportunity and potential, you really need to begin having data at the minor league levels, college levels, even high school levels, international, because so many players come from international. And what we've tried to do is get into our system, extensive data that cuts across all of these things so that the analytics can then be done, and you can put the tools in the hands of the clubs so that they can not only look at their current roster or other major league rosters, but look throughout the potential and make those judgments.
Vince, maybe you can start on this. And yeah, big picture, just jump in on that. What is next as far as the data, field FX, tracking data? What is next?
Well, to put it in perspective, when the book Moneyball was written just 10 years ago, 11 years ago, whatever it is, we had about 2% of the data we have today. So when I say data, I'm talking about the record of what actually transpired in a baseball game. From 1870 to current time, we had 2% of that in 2003. So with the explosion of data, and Jeff mentioned all the different capture techniques from radar to video to, we're getting ball movement. We're now getting, 720,000 pitches thrown a year. We're getting 15 to 20 measures on each pitch. So being able to process that information in a meaningful way, and it really starts with the questions you ask, because I think Bill said it could be overwhelming if you don't have focus. So I think, it's so critical that teams are asking the right strategic questions that are going to be difference makers on the field from this massive data that's available.
Bill, you want to jump on that?
I would agree that at the end of the day, you want to have the best possible tools. And that's true in any profession, any industry. You want to make sure you're using the best possible tools. And I think that, like with any new technology, it takes time to develop. And I think one of the things that we're seeing is a kind of, and this gets to the point Nate was making about a moving target. You're getting all of this new information coming. At the same time, you have all these new technologies that allow you to process and use it. And it really requires good decisions about how to structure your organization to take advantage of it. And you asked specifically about what's new and what's with these tracking technologies. I mean, there's no question that you're going to see on the defensive side more information coming out of these tracking systems that over time are going to lead to a much better ability to analyze a player's defensive skills. And this is going to open up a whole new area. I mean, from our standpoint, the area Jeff mentioned, health, biometrics, injury, and the second area, defense, we think are going to be the two, kind of big new areas that are going to get a lot of attention over the next 5 years.
Where are we with that now, Jeff? As far as, it seemed like, and we had conversations about this, when the Cardinals seem to have all these line drive hitters, that perhaps is not an accident. Perhaps you're looking at the angle off the bat, the exit velocity off the bat, that there's a bunch of Allen Craigs that you saw at an early spot. Is that where it's at now?
The new data has allowed us to look at things in a lot of different ways. We're no longer talking about a single versus a double. We're talking about the vector of the ball coming off the bat and putting a run expectancy on that vector and adding it up over the course of the season and understanding how much variability there is in all of that. So from that standpoint, the player evaluation component of it is pretty advanced. But we don't know what's coming next. No one expected to be using Doppler radar to track the spin axis of a ball, 5-10 years ago, and no one expected to use the video cameras for what we're using them for. So I'm excited to see what's coming next. It's interesting to your point about going in the minors and to Division I and so forth. I don't think the day is too far away where we have a TrackMan-like system or a PitchFX-like system in every Division I ballpark in the country, and that will enable us to really draw some neat correlations between what's happening with that bat in college and what we predict in the future. So I'm excited about that.
One of the things that's exciting that we're able to do today with this batted ball data, for example, which gives you the velocity off the bat, the vertical launch angle, and the horizontal launch angle of every batted ball hit, is we can now develop an individual park factor for a player. So when the Yankees are evaluating Brian McCann, they can calculate based on all of the batted balls, the 250 batted balls he put in play in 2013, that at Turner Field in Atlanta where he played, his index is 91, and you move that same guy with those same batted balls to Yankee Stadium and it's a 104. So you get a 13% bump. Now, I know all those games aren't played at home, but the point is you can develop an individual park factor for every player in baseball. And I think that really helps you understand where there's opportunity to bring players into your park because of the way they play.
What do you think, Nate? What interests you?
It is interesting that pitching has caught up so much to our understanding of hitting, but maybe things that are looking at the velocity of a ball off the bat. One thing just as an observer is that it seemed like kind of 5-10 years ago when I was more in the thick of this, more of the innovation was coming from outsiders, from media organizations and so forth. And now it seems like the clubs have pulled pretty far ahead in some ways. That if you have any kind of bright young sabermetric talent, that they get hired by a team. And so, I think we also want to, this is a selfish incentive, but say we want to have an active community outside of the clubs as well. That provides research that can help all 30 teams potentially down the road. But it does seem like, the fact that we now understand pitching and defense 80% as well as we understand hitting is really different than for most of the history of the game.
And if you think about it in terms of specifics, I mean, people have talked forever about, whether a fielder gets, a bad, good, or great jump on the ball. But when you're actually tracking down to, 30 times a second every fielder's movement, and you're correlating that to the ball coming off the bat, you're actually going to have objective, measurable data with respect to whether a fielder reacts quickly, reacts in the right direction, and so forth. And that's never been done before and addresses a particular area that people have talked about forever without any kind of objective measurement. And that's just one small example of where we're going. So I think that you're going to see, everybody talks about how far we've come, and it's certainly true. And every club is much more engaged in this than they were 10 years ago. But there's still a long way to go.
Is it getting more proprietary where and then it's going to be an intelligent race within each club as to who, is that a possible next advantage and who's able to utilize this and not let it out to the public?
For certain clubs, the strategy is to develop proprietary information and gain an edge, and I think we're one of those clubs. But part of how we gain our proprietary edge is by reading the work that's done by the analysts who are really doing it for all 30 clubs or to sell magazines or page views or whatever, and I think that's worked really well. Some organizations are probably not that interested in developing those capabilities internally because it's a different skill set. You need to know how to hire the right types of people, how to motivate them, how to integrate them with your organization, and there's a lot of roadblocks that are traditionally put up. So we're one of them. I know there's other clubs out there that are doing it, and we feel like we can gain a competitive advantage.
You could put out a hell of a magazine with all the writers you have at this point, right?
We could. We hire a lot of our guys
You've been collecting these guys.
from the public domain.
But that is a real issue, actually. We've talked to a lot of organizations about, because you can do, as Jeff was describing, an internal system and hire people to build it and build a great system. But part of the problem, from the perspective of the club, is it's a moving target, and technology is constantly changing. And we certainly have the view that you're better off working with an engineering company and a technology company which is constantly upgrading and taking advantage of new technology. But we often work with clubs who have built their own systems and then supplement it with the kinds of things we do. But that is certainly a decision point, an inflection point for an organization to decide how much to invest in having its own technology team and upgrading constantly versus how much to outsource it.
How many teams subscribe to you directly?
We have almost all the teams. 27 of the 30 major league teams use our system to some degree, but some use it very extensively to really address, kind of all aspects of their front office decisions. And we're just rolling out the kind of final piece, which is the video solution piece, which allows them to ingest video from multiple cameras and so forth. And then some use it to supplement what they're doing internally.
Let me, and I hesitate to bring this up, but I want to get to a bunch of other subjects, so we're going to try to tree-top around. There's a lot of talk of this, or there was some talk of the Red Sox buying up guys with good chemistry. And it's just kind of a great nonsense dump, but maybe there is something to actually getting group behavior and meshing them together. Jeff, is there anything to this, or do you just try to get an upbeat guy who can also hit?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. There's no correlation between being a nice or a good person and being a good baseball player, or even potentially a good teammate. I don't know how many of you have read about Bo Porter's synergistic chemistry lab that's going on in spring training, but he basically has a exercise every day going on in the clubhouse, just the players, for 15 minutes before they go out on the field. So clearly he thinks it's important. I think it's important. It is important. It's incredibly hard to quantify. It's incredibly hard to measure. And it's one of those things that I think you know it when you see it, and you know when it's not there as well. But creating it is really, really difficult.
So it's like team building skills, team bonding? What are you doing?
Some of that stuff. I mean, leaders have to evolve naturally, and there has to be followership. And I'll give you an example. Jose Altuve is 23 years old. This is his third year in the big leagues. He didn't speak English well when he got to the big leagues. At 23, he is now our team leader. 3 times this spring, he's gotten up and addressed the team the way you would expect a 34-year-old veteran to do it. And that's just, it's organic the way it's emerging. And we've got 40% of our players in our whole system are from Latin America. They're following Jose, even though they're older than him. It's just great when you see those components happen. But to try and engineer them, I think it's difficult.
What do you think, Vince?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think we have to separate the difficulty of engineering it and measuring it from the value that it brings. I mean, enormous value. I mean, I'm doing a study on it now. I'm actually presenting it at the Sabre Analytics Conference in 2 weeks on team chemistry, interviews with players, coaches, managers, et cetera. So I think it's palpable, it's tangible. Not at the stage where I'm interested in measuring it, but I think codifying it, really defining it, understanding all the different ways in which it impacts the organization, including players' performance, is huge.
Rob?
Well, I mean, I've just been struck over the years by how many teams had great chemistry on opening day and then have lousy chemistry in the second half when they're losing. And vice versa. I mean, I grew up in the 70s. That was when I first started paying attention to baseball. And remembering back, it seems like the A's and the Yankees were constantly fighting, like literally throwing punches at each other in the clubhouse. And guys were getting hurt and missing time, and yet they kept winning pennants. So then again, you talk to anybody in baseball, and they will tell you, smart people, and they will tell you that chemistry is very important and does play a big role. So you don't dismiss it. You can't dismiss it. But trying to put your finger on it is incredibly tough. So I'm willing to just sort of throw my hands up and say, yes, it's important. And if I were Jeff, I would try to figure out ways to make it better. But trying to go out and pick this guy or that guy, you know, the thing with the Red Sox last year, nobody on the club thought that they were going to win 97 games before the season started. And I don't think anybody thinks they're going to win 97 games this year, even though they have all those great chemistry guys. So it's important. Is it 1 win a year or is it 8? I don't know. I'd probably be closer to 1 than 8, but who knows?
What do you think, Bill?
I'd like to say that at Bloomberg we have 100 engineers cracking the chemistry and the clubhouse code and so forth, but we don't. And I don't think we will. I think it's clearly an important area, but I also think it's a very difficult thing to put your finger on. It behooves clubs in any sport to be thinking about this all the time and thinking about, you know, leadership in the clubhouse and where issues can go wrong. I mean, we obviously have seen issues, you know, in football with the Dolphins or other things like that. But I think it is a very hard thing to quantify. You know, what we try to do is sort of take a different tack, which is if we create a workflow that frees up clubs because we're making projects that might have taken hours, something you can pull up in seconds, that frees up clubs to be able to focus on, you know, other things, gives people more time. But at least at the moment, we haven't assigned a team of engineers to crack the chemistry code.
Right. Nate, anything?
You know, it would be very valuable if you had some way to get guys to always perform at their kind of 70th percentile projection, so to speak. So yeah, chemistry could matter quite a bit. I think less in baseball, which is less of a team sport than football, for example. But still, it's certainly hard to measure. I'd like to see someone design like a real randomized control trial or something, where maybe you label a set of guys who are thought of as being good clubhouse leaders and see if they convey some benefit to their new teams when they change teams. You know, absent that, even though it might be important, I mean, look, we've hired a lot of people at 538. I certainly look at how they'll fit into the office a lot. It can still excuse, though, a lot of like chicken shit decision making too, right? Where anytime things like chemistry and momentum can be excused to make a not very thorough decision based on gut feeling, based on things that, you know, you shouldn't be evaluating as much. So, you know, approaching it cautiously, I think, is the most prudent thing to do for now.
We're now at the 3 true outcomes are at about 30% of offense now, of all offensive outcomes. Rob, do we want to change this? Is this historically, should the ball be in play more for a more exciting sport that will compete with the NFL?
Well, every fan has his or her own answer to that question. And I'm sure a lot of younger fans are perfectly fine with all the strikeouts because it's what they know. I think ultimately baseball is a better game. The more players who are involved, the better and more interesting a game it is. Strikeouts are exciting when it's Nolan Ryan or Roger Clemens or Aroldis Chapman, but when you have an everyday starter, like a humdrum starting pitcher, striking out 7 or 8 per 9 innings, I'm not sure anybody goes to the ballpark to see that. So I think something should be done. I try to separate that aesthetic value judgment from just not having grown up with all the strikeouts. You never want to be one of those guys who just says baseball when I was a kid was the best baseball that ever existed. And I don't really believe that, but it was really good in the 70s. And the 80s too. Because you had home run hitters, and you had power pitchers, and you had guys stealing bases, and you had guys hitting 350. You had everything. And I think one of the things that makes baseball so interesting is the variety of experiences. And I don't sound like, Jeff's right. It's a great game right now, but we see this path with strikeouts, and we talk about 3 true outcomes, but really the home runs and the walks are not at historic levels at all. They're basically holding steady, whereas the strikeouts keep going up. I think ultimately that is an issue that baseball will want to address. It's going to be difficult because you would have to change some rules, and you'd have to change some conditions on the field, and that means you have to negotiate with the players. And players are conservative by nature. So it's going to be tough to do anything. I think baseball will grapple with the strikeout problem, whether successfully or unsuccessfully, at some point in the next 5 or 10 years.
Well, you have to know, kids this age, are they going to be watching basketball, soccer, football, more action, more spectacle?
Well, the other issue, too, I should have brought this up, is that 3 true outcomes lead to more time, and they slow down the pace of the game. And baseball, I think universally, everybody thinks the game should be shorter or at least quicker in terms of the pace. And I think balls in play gives you a quicker paced game.
Jeff, what about that?
Well, first of all, there's a lot of exciting players breaking into the majors these days, guys like Billy Hamilton and, George Springer, to put a plug in, 37 home runs, 43 stolen bases. I mean, these guys are pretty unbelievable athletes, and there's plenty of excitement out there. I also think that the pitching is extraordinary today. Guys are throwing in the mid-90s. It's routine, even in spring training, to go to a game and see 5 or 6 guys throwing 95 plus. And shoot, it's really hard to not strike out when a guy's throwing that hard. Strikeouts are near and dear to my heart. We broke the record last year for team strikeouts, hoping not to do it again this year. We had a lot of swing and miss guys. Also happened to be, we got perfect game by Kane a few years back in San Francisco. It was the most exciting game I've ever been to, even though I was on the losing end of it. Last year when Darvish came close to a perfect game before, single up the middle in the 9th inning with 2 outs, that was a pretty exciting game. I mean, I think people love pitcher's duels, and I like your reference to Ryan and Clemens, 2 of my special advisors. They're gonna help us strike some guys out.
I think it's there are certainly things that should be looked at in terms of pace of play, because that is something that has been a focus. But I think that the great tradition of baseball is such that it's cyclical, and that you do have these incredible duels, and sometimes pitcher wins, sometimes batter wins. I would be very hesitant to start diving into that. But what I do think is that fans are digging deeper into the game and love a lot of the gaming aspects of it. I mean, we're finding that from fantasy baseball, there's a huge interest now in more data, more analytics. I mean, we're able to do predictive kinds of things that can bring a game to a more engaging level. Like, we're able to project in real time, as each pitch goes through, and we're working with a number of broadcasters to do this, how the probability of a particular batter against a particular pitcher in a particular situation, his on-base probability changes. A ball gets thrown, it changes. A strike gets thrown, it changes. What's the probability of a pitcher throwing a breaking ball on the next pitch versus a fastball based on his tendency? All these things can be used to help the engagement, really create the interest in the fabric of the game. So, I would be very hesitant to change some of those core things, but I think you can bring out a lot more in terms of visualization, data, engagement, and do something with pace of play. But I guess I would be very hesitant to get right at the core and really start making changes in the rules. That's at least my view.
What do you think, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, it is cyclical. People sometimes assume that when something's going up, it keeps going up. More often in most fields, and certainly in baseball, it then reverts back to the mean. So to think about, now when pitchers are, so much power pitching today, so many strikeouts, what types of hitters can exploit that environment? Maybe it is kind of banjo hitters all of a sudden who would have more of an advantage because they're going against the grain a little bit more. So I think that innovation will probably lead to a shift back. I do agree, though, that there are concerns about the pace of the game. It's funny, in football, analytics would say you should go for it more on fourth down, onside kicks leads to a more exciting style of play, but there are problems. I mean, I think it is a tangibly more dull style of play in baseball, slower as well. So that's an aesthetic concern more than a strategic one, but I'm sympathetic to Rob's case here.
I thought there'd be more when Ichiro came about, kind of showing a different baseball culture. I guess he's a singular, a unique talent, obviously. But I just thought there would be more of that, going back to what you're saying, maybe a Matty Alou type, or a lot of the hitters that we saw in the 20s and 30s. But we have not. You're incentivized to do that risk reward, swing hard, and so all the incentives are moving right toward the three true outcomes. So can the United States baseball culture change in that regard to try to exploit that advantage?
I do think you're right. It's an ebb and flow, and there's going to be a Tony Gwynn, Wade Boggs type of player who hits 350, and all of a sudden that's going to be the new model of success. 350 with a 450 on base, and a guy that doesn't hit 25 home runs, doesn't strike out. We have this guy in the minor leagues named Ronald Torreyes, and the reason we traded some international cap space to get him, he had the lowest strikeout rate in the minor leagues. He's 20 years old in Double-A. I think his strikeout rate is like 2.7%, something in that range. So we're trying that to see how that experiment works. So I think we're going to see lots of different types of players come through, and I don't think it's a U.S. International thing.
Okay. We're going to take your questions in a few moments, but let's start with where are we with player projections? Nate, where again, since your days of projecting with deadly accuracy in baseball, where are we now, or what would you update or change if you could have a new sort of PECOTA system?
I mean, PECOTA, when I built it 11 years ago now, and it was said before, there's a hell of a lot more data that's become available since then. So frankly, if I were building a projection system, I'd probably kind of start from scratch really today. So not only do we have more data now, we have enough years of it in some cases where you can see what is predictive and what isn't really. The closer you can come to measuring the fundamental skill, instead of having some proxy for it, then the better you can do, the more signal that you can get. So it seems like I read anecdotally that, for example, pitching projection systems that account for velocity, a pretty basic variable, that's a pretty big gain from doing that alone. At the same time, like doing a projection system because it accounts for kind of literally everything is extremely labor intensive. You'd probably have to spend half a year with a bunch of smart people to really innovate over what's out there in the public domain, and I'm sure what some teams have today. So it's a fascinating question, but we've come so far, and yet projections have been maybe not left behind. I mean, they have been improving. But as some of the smart quants are kind of hired by teams, I think the public domain stuff has not improved as much as you see in some other areas.
Yeah, I mean, the way we've approached it is from the professional side, we really try to give the major league organizations the tools to apply their own acumen and innovation to kind of come up with those things. The way where we focused on projections and predictive is really the fantasy side, and we've seen baseball fans around the country increase their interest in fantasy. Our predictive formulas, we take a huge number of factors into account. It's obviously a little bit of a black box. We don't reveal it, but our projections for NFL were, given the award for the best projections. Our baseball projections last year were great. The draft kit, I think we actually just launched our draft kit on bsports.com yesterday or something for this season. And, it's a lot of fun. I mean, to me, it's in a way the fun part of what we do because we really dig into it. We have a number of mathematicians and engineers who develop the profile, and it's getting better and better.
Yeah, I think the more contemporary projection systems today, with all the data that we have, are going to diminish their reliance on the outcomes. So in other words, diminish the reliance on what the batting average was, home runs and so forth last year, and focus much more on, for a hitter, for example, on his batted ball performance. And also in the process of doing that, incorporate the ballpark in a more realistic way, and even adjust for the quality of opposition, which varies from year to year and varies dramatically from division to division. So I think the nuances which were not really on the radar screen 10, 15 years ago are totally on the radar screen now, and the data's there to do it.
What do you think, Rob?
I mean, basically everything this guy said about if you factor in line drive rate and and bat speed and all those things, you can obviously come up with better projections. How much better, I'm not sure. The ones that we had 5 years ago, the really simple ones, worked pretty well. For the purposes of drafting a really good fantasy team or building a real baseball team, you need the good stuff. But people who do what I do and just want to figure out if this team's going to win 90 games or 88 games before the season, give or take 5 games, we can't really do a whole lot better than we're already doing. I don't think. I mean, I haven't seen anybody with a projection system that allows them to beat the over-unders consistently yet, which is what you would want to do if you were, looking at the macro stuff.
What do you do, Jeff? I mean, you're looking at guys high A, double A, and how do you try to figure out what will translate?
We have a projection system that's probably best in class, but I think the challenge, we're not trying to sell newspapers, we're not trying to capture eyeballs, we're trying to predict the future and win games. We have a lot of experts, 50 scouts out there looking at players from amateur ranks all the way up to MLB, and they're giving us really valuable information based off of their expertise. And we're taking that information and blending it in with the projection system to create a better projection system. And it's working, and it's great, and it's, the public domain doesn't have access to these type of expertise, at least not the way we do. And that's really been our focus. And starting a new projection system from scratch in 2004 with the Cardinals, and then being able to start a whole new one again in 2011. You're right, the fundamentals were there, but it was really a whole new ball game given all the new data that was out there.
Excellent. All right, we have your questions now here, so let's go through a few of them, and whoever wants to weigh in here. Here's the first question from the crowd here. Coaches, players probably aren't stats or math guys. How do you present your findings on field in a way that's not intimidating? Jeff, why don't you start with that?
It's important, and communication is huge. You have to speak their language and get them involved. Really, the best way to get someone to implement something is if they think it's their idea. We've always known that. It's management 101. And so you really have to bring them along step by step. They're never going to learn all the math behind it. I don't know the math behind it. But when you start to show them the results and walk them through the process and they start to have good experiences, that's when it really clicks.
Bill, you want to weigh in on that? Because all the data, like what is digestible?
Well, I think the nice thing is that the sort of universe of view is changing, because you've got a whole generation of players who are being raised on interactive media. I mean, I saw a statistic the other day that said that, people who have smartphones, 2/3 of them say they couldn't live without it. And this is a technology that didn't exist 10 years ago. So when you go to a player, in fact, we have an iPad service that we actually provide to the players directly that allows them to see the video of their matchup, of any matchup actually, but if they're preparing for a game the next day, they can do it, and they can tap on any player and see all the videos loaded, and they're very comfortable with it, increasingly so. So I think that Jeff's point's correct, that you've got to make sure to provide it in a way that's easy for them to use and accessible and clearly shows the value, but it's a much more receptive group than it was certainly 10 years ago, because all these young players have been raised on this technology, and we're finding that they're very open to using it, as long as you make it very intuitive and easy to use.
Anybody else want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm meeting with a manager and his coaches on Monday morning in Phoenix to talk to him about why the one-to-one career data for a batter-pitcher matchup is really obsolete, and it really doesn't have a great deal of impact. And instead, we're going to share with him why looking at how a batter's performance against a cluster of pitchers who have a high degree of similarity can add to the whole picture in the equation. So there won't be any math in that discussion. There doesn't need to be. It's the principle of it, and it's really talking about how we're going to take the one-on-one data that he's used to, and we're going to combine that with this pitcher cluster data to give him a better number that's going to give him better insights. And as long as you tell the person that, look, this is never the answer sheet, there's always room for judgment, and all we want to do is equip you with one more piece of information to make a highly complex roster or lineup decision or pinch hitting decision. I mean, you just have to lob it up that way and not be dogmatic about it. But I think, as I said when we started, I think this is one of the real opportunities still for clubs is to begin to manage that process through to get acceptance.
Here's a good question. Nate, you can get this first. Will we get to the point where the best defensive player will shift from position to position based on analytics? I hadn't thought of that.
That's a great question. Yeah, maybe, potentially, right? If you have a guy who has, incredible agility in the infield, why couldn't you line up at second base sometimes instead of shortstop? It might be kind of a lot of effort at the margin. That's something where you would have to kind of change the culture of the player clubhouse a little bit. But, it's also things that, there's a category of things that probably have some theoretical gain where you kind of improve your defense by 1 or 2% that people wouldn't uptake necessarily, but who knows? If the Pirates can get that much advantage by pursuing defensive shifts, then that would kind of be the next logical step, I would think.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. What do you think, Jeff?
Well, when you move all the infielders over on that side and you have one guy on the left, you want that guy to be able to cover as much ground as possible. So maybe it's not the third baseman, maybe it should be the shortstop. Another interesting point, and this is something that Sig Meidel loves, and Brad Mills did it a couple years ago. You bring in your lefty specialist to face a lefty, and then there's a righty coming up, throw him out in right field for an out, and then bring him back in for another lefty later. Things like that could be kind of fun, but they're hard to implement.
Yeah, it hasn't been done since with Davey Johnson, right? Did with the '86
well,
Mets.
Brad Mills did it 2 years ago with Leslie Wright.
Huh. That should be done more often, shouldn't it?
I think so.
If they can field.
Well, given how small the rosters are, or given how few hitters are on the rosters these days, it makes more sense than ever, I think.
Yeah.
I think it's a great question. Imagine if you have a significant difference between your defensive left fielder and your defensive right fielder, and every time you've got a lefty hitter or a righty hitter come up, they just switch, so you've got your best outfielder in the right place. It's a really interesting question.
Maybe one good rule change would be only 10 pitchers per roster, max.
What's that?
If you said teams can't carry more than 10 pitchers at a time, it might lead to more innovation and getting pitch runner types of players and having guys who using the bullpen more creatively.
And it would shorten the games too.
Yeah.
It's a great idea.
We'd have more injuries though, potentially.
Why?
Well, there's you overuse guys. If you use guys 3 days in a row, 4 days in a row, you're risking their arm health.
What if you liberalize the promotion rules so you could use the AAA roster?
Yeah, if you churned it more.
Which is already happening.
Yeah.
It's a good question. Here's another one. Yesterday, Bill James mentioned the next big analytics push was understanding the vast gap between potential and performance. I guess that's performance maximizing. Any thoughts on that? All digesting it. Take a moment.
As usual, he said it all. Yeah.
Pass.
I think that's the focus of a lot of the analytics effort as it is. You're really looking to find where the opportunity is and where, particularly with a lot of the new data, so looking at balls coming off the bat or looking at defensive performance, where you can find opportunities to have guys improve. A lot of like the video that I was showing a minute ago on your iPad, if you can see certain patterns or things, it'll help you to improve your performance. So I guess I would agree in the abstract, but I do think that's really the focus of a lot of these new tools and advanced analytics.
Well, there are a couple of fundamental questions that come along with what Bill said, and I would like to ask Jeff these. Are drafts more successful now than they were 20 years ago? Do you know?
For me, they've been.
What about pitcher injury rates? Those are the same as they were 20 years ago, roughly, aren't they?
Yeah, I think.
With all the data that's come in and all the medicals and all the great work, pitchers get hurt just as often now as they ever have.
Yeah.
Which
And
is
that
might be
may
because they throw harder than they ever have before.
Well, and the money's big, so you want to get that contract. You kind of our pitchers the other day in the clubhouse were having the discussion: is it better to be great for 3 years or good for 10 years? Which way are you going to make more money? It's a good question.
Where are we with maximizing performance? Dirk Hayhurst has his book out now, he talks about just being lost, and going through rehab, isolated, and now he was a fringe pitcher, of course. There wasn't a big investment in him, but is there something to having, I know in Soccernomics years ago, part of the advantage was when you got a transfer over, you made sure that he had people to help him speak the language, that his wife knew where she could shop, that the kids would be placed in a school. He just had kind of a whole staff to make sure the player was acclimated and happy. Is there anything being done on that now? What is being done?
Well, I think there's a lot being done on that. Like 40% of our players are from Latin America. We make sure we have Latin coaches at every level. We have instructors that teach English at every level. We give classes in Dominican. There's a lot that cultural transformation is a big barrier. In terms of rehab, most of the spring training complexes have become rehab centers for the clubs. And so when you're down there, now it's not unusual to have a full-time pitching coach down there who's dedicated just to rehab pitchers, trainers. You've got a whole group down there. So very, very, very few guys are kind of left isolated anymore.
Anybody want to weigh in on maximizing performance? I mean, is a happier player a better player? Not to be cold, we want just people to be happy. But if you want to get something out of them, are they better off being happy?
You would think, most people.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a huge fan of the word happy because it sounds a little bit trite, but I think a player who's not distracted and a player who feels supported by his teammates, those are the two words that I would use. That yes, they're gonna perform better. They have less distraction. They can be focused. They feel a level of confidence that their teammates can help instill in them. So those are all important factors.
I think it just touches on, the really strong organizations understand that there are, multiple pieces of a puzzle from A to Z that you have to do well across the board, and you have to think about it that way in order to have a successful organization going forward. And that ties into, player comfort, it ties into chemistry, it ties into analytics, it ties into the right personnel. It's all the different pieces. So that really is all that I think it touches on. I thought that point in Soccernomics was really interesting because a bunch of clubs had said, well, we're paying this guy, $100 million. He can find his own nanny or figure out where the school is. Well, that's wrong because, getting the, kind of cultural piece when it's such a foreign experience down was a critical kind of step for a bunch of clubs to make it work. So, I think it really ties into a club has to look at any organization, sports or otherwise, is look at all the different pieces because if one of those links in the chain breaks, the whole chain can fall apart.
I'd rather have hungry players than happy players.
Really?
Really. I mean, there's such a thing as too comfortable. Some of these academies in Dominican, you're taking kids from abject poverty and putting them in what's probably like a 4-star hotel, and then they get comfortable. I mean, I think I'm not saying you don't treat your players well, but the desire to improve, that drive to prove everybody else wrong, that chip on your shoulder, that drives a lot of players that have success.
Is there a gap in? I'm sorry. Go ahead, Nate.
I mean, you would think too that certain guys react better to guaranteed contracts than others. If you're guaranteed $150 million over some number of years, no matter how you perform, then for some guys that makes you very comfortable. For some people, it means that you have no incentive really at all. One thing we haven't talked about much on this panel today is kind of the financial side of things, where I think decision making has gotten only marginally better. There are still a lot of stupid free agent contracts given out every year. There's been some improvement on how teams are using analytics to understand the fan experience, but that's where there might be more low-hanging fruit and has implications for how guys are motivated to perform.
It seems like, as far as financially, teams and players, agents have kind of gotten to the same value system, right? I mean, it's kind of, you're in accord as to what you're supposed to be paid. Very few.
No, I disagree with that.
Really?
No, we're definitely
There's no
not.
arbitration? Nobody goes to arbitration anymore? You kind of understand. Everyone's going to always be asking for more money, of course, but you kind of know where players are at and what their value is.
We disagree with the agents and the players themselves on what their value is. It's a difficult conversation to have, but to your point, when I was here 2 years ago, I talked about that, not just player valuation, but player evaluation, but player valuation and how we're moving towards that. And I do think the industry is doing stuff, but maybe it's not as obvious. We hired a full-time economist to work in the front office, and all he does is try and understand the dynamics of the market, and he values every player and what we should be paying and what the inflation rate is and all of that. And we've got a couple resources dedicated to that. But no, it's always going to be a negotiation. I mean, all these deals that the Braves just signed, A lot of people think they're good deals for the club. A lot of people think they're not. There's going to be a disagreement. And it really depends on what the Braves' perspective is. They know more about what their future revenues look like than anybody else does. We know more about what the future revenues of the Astros looks like. So, we need to make decisions for us, not for the Yankees, not for the Braves.
Well, speaking of valuation, I mean, that's a great point because the actual values of the players are way behind the analytics at this point, I think. When you talk about pitch framing, nobody gets paid for pitch framing. I mean, I guess you could maybe argue maybe Russell Martin got a better deal, a little bit better from the Pirates than he would have otherwise because of his reputation. But, does Jose Molina does he get paid for the 20 runs a year he saves, the Rays? I don't think so. When we have the new defensive metrics in a couple of years with the tracking stuff, they'll be able to put real values on guys that now you can sort of dismiss the defensive metrics now. Even though we don't, it's very easy to do that out in the wide world. And an arbitrator is not going to listen to a case about UZR most likely. But, in 3 years, when you can say flat out, this guy absolutely saved 30 runs, and we have the hard data, the tracking data to prove it, you're going to have to pay a guy for saving 30 runs, and you don't have to now.
One of the other reasons why, to Nate's point, that maybe the financials haven't caught up with the analytics is we have these aberrations, and the whole regional sports network phenomenon has thrown a real wrench into the league, the league's economics in a way, because all of a sudden it justifies a deal that made absolutely no sense without that regional network, and that's affecting one team and one team only. So it really does wreak havoc.
Well, now we're getting to the point of looking at what's one player worth. There's one guy who's really good out there. He's really young, he's really fast, and he's under club control for a few more years. They're talking extension, and I guess those 2 free agent years, we're looking at, 40 to 45 million per year. Nate, what's one player worth?
I mean, given the going rate at what players are, so Mike Trout is basically the best player in the projection system era, if you will. So yeah, he might be getting 35, 40 million a year, I would think, on the open market if he stays healthy.
Bill, what's one guy worth?
Well, I come from the Bloomberg world, which says he's worth what the market will pay. So, and I don't really mean to punt the question, but I think that it's not a static question. It's really something that's going to continue to change and shift. It is going to be contentious over time. There are going to be new metrics that bear on it. So, to simply put a number out there, maybe Nate's right, but I really feel like it's one of these things that it's going to be a constantly changing market, and that's what the whole free market, will kind of drive.
It's kind of hard to say when you're saying it's up $5 to $7 million a win, and you got a 10-win player, age 21, where $70 million a year. I know that's where there'd be contentious negotiations.
We're trying to project two things. We're trying to project his performance, which you can only do so well over the course of 8 years or 10 years or whatever contract length you're talking about. As good as Mike Trout is, he probably won't be the greatest player in Major League history, even if he projects to be that today, because not many guys get to be the greatest player ever. And it's also difficult to know what the TV money's going to look like 5-10 years from now. It might keep going up and up and up. There are people who think, I don't, but there are people who think there's a bubble and it's about to pop. So who knows?
Yeah, these are Vince about to jump in, but I was going to say what Vince said is right. How do you then also weigh in if a particular high-profile player who's got a real marquee value and a real following can affect your TV ratings on your regional network that you own 45% of by 0.3, and how do you then calculate that? And that's an add. So it really is a market decision, and maybe there is a bubble that'll burst, or maybe the injury piece will come in and suddenly affect things tremendously. So I think it's a very volatile kind of situation.
And through the history of, let me just throw in Vince, through the history of baseball, it's always the money can't go up. These guys are getting paid way too much. They can't possibly get higher, and it seems like, no, it's always the case it's getting higher.
Yeah. I think the unique opportunity that the Angels have with Trout is because his service time started and his extraordinary performance at such an early age, they can lock him up only for a couple of years of free agency and still give him a huge bite at the apple at 29 or 30. If I were the Angels, I would take that bet. So in other words, I would pay him full market rates as they need to, but only until sort of age 28, 29, 30, which allows me to pay him less because he knows he can go back into the market and get a huge deal versus try to buy him out longer term. Plus, I also don't like the risk of going out, that many more years. I mean, what the Cardinals did with Pujols turned out to probably be a very smart model, locking him up with a few years of service time, but not, in his case, he was a little older than Trout could be at the same level of degree, because he came up later, Pujols. But that's the model that I like, frankly.
All right. Well, this was terrific. Guys, thank you so much. Fascinating stuff. Nate Silver, Bill Squadron, Rob Nyer, Vince Gennaro, Jeff Luno. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, guys.